Alright, we are on page 3 of the packet, and we're going to start with these trig notes. The first thing we're going to do is start right here, where it says number 1, and it's talking about angle B, so in reference to angle B. So you always want to circle that reference angle, circle angle B. And then in reference to that, what's the opposite? Adjacent, hypotenuse. So we already know what the word hypotenuse means. We've already talked about that before in the past. It is the angle, or it's the side across from the right angle. That is going to be our hypotenuse. So we'll go ahead and start with that one. Segment AB is our hypotenuse. And then for the opposite leg and adjacent leg. If you think of the word opposite, the opposite leg is on the opposite side of the triangle, and then the adjacent leg, adjacent means next to. So adjacent would be next to angle B, opposite would be on the opposite side of the triangle. So the opposite side of the triangle from B is AC. The adjacent or next to side would be BC. Okay? Alright, so actually right now what we are going to do is I want you to turn to page 11 in your packet, pause the video, and do page 11. So what I mean by that, so I'm on page 11 now, I want you to circle the reference angle. So that's the reference angle for this one, and this is the reference angle. You can see what's going on. And then I just want you to label the 3 sides. So this would be hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. Do that for 1 through 12 all the way down the page. Go ahead and pause the video. Alright, and when you're done with that, we're going to move back to the notes. So you're actually done with the first of the 3 pages of the assignment today. Alright. So, we're going to move to this box. This is what this is all about. This is sine, cosine, and tangent. I know it says sin, cos, and tan, but it's sine, cosine, and tangent. And this is kind of a little cheat sheet down here. And it's just saying that sine is equal to O over H, which we've actually, all of these letters should be familiar because you should have just filled out a bunch of triangles with those 3 letters. So the O stands for opposite, A stands for adjacent, H stands for hypotenuse, like we just talked about. So the sine is your opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. Alright, cosine is your adjacent side divided by your hypotenuse. And then tangent is your opposite divided by adjacent. And you will become very familiar with all these. But one thing I want you to notice is that all of these have an angle beside them. So sine of an angle is equal to the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine of an angle is equal to the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Tangent of an angle is equal to opposite over adjacent. And one way that you can remember this, just a little fun acronym, is some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. Which I know, it's a little scandalous, but it's an easy way to remember it, and you won't forget it for the test. Okay, so let's look over here now. We're on number 2. We've got cosine of m, so this is our angle. So remember in our box we had sine of angle A, angle A, angle A. Now it's sine of angle m. So that's our reference angles. That's what I was talking about earlier. With the reference angle, you're always going to circle it. So the sine of m is going to be equal, if we look back over to our box, some old hippie, the sine of m is equal to the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. Alright, so the opposite side. M is our reference angle, so we can go ahead and label the opposite side. Our hypotenuse is going to be the longest side. The opposite is the one that's furthest away. And the adjacent is the closest side to M. So sine equals O over H, which the opposite side is 7. And then the hypotenuse is 25. If this was simplifiable, if you could simplify, you would at this point. We can't simplify this, but don't forget that you would if you could. The adjacent is, or the cosine, excuse me, is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So your adjacent side right here is 24. Your hypotenuse is 25. And that would be your ratio, 24 divided by 25. Okay? Alright, and then the tangent is opposite over adjacent, which we wrote in our box over here. So the opposite side is 7, and the adjacent is 24. Again, if you could simplify, you would, but you can't. So this is when we are talking about ratios. These are trig ratios. Alright? Don't forget, that's what these are. These are trig ratios. So anytime a question asks for a ratio, you're looking for a fraction. Alright? Great. Now I want you to take a calculator. So now, if you have a calculator, I'm going to just start at the front screen, and I'm going to go into opening a document. Now, we have a problem. Trig only works when that says DEG. It says RAD right now, so we have to change that. And so here is how you change that, and I'll show you. You click Doc, so right there, Doc, and go to the Documents, and then you are going to go to 7. Alright, so 7, which is Settings, and then click 2. So Doc 7.2, don't forget that. And then under radian, we change that to degree. Go down, say make default. Yay. It'll load for a second, and then it'll say degree on it. Alright? And that's what you're looking for. So you always just look in the top right hand corner to make sure it is in degree. If it's not, then you click Doc 7.2 and change it to degree. Alright? Now here, the rest of the time we're going to be using our calculators. So what we are talking about here is sine, cosine, and tangent, and we just want to show you what these are. It's really nice that we have calculators and we don't have to use big charts that tell us what the sign of all these numbers are. We can just put it in the calculator. So what I want you to do is find, under the control button, you'll find the word trig. So click on that. So you click on trig, and we want to find the tangent of 50. Not the tangent inverse, which is down here, but the tangent of 50. Alright, we figured that out. It's 1.19. We are going to write that number in. It used to be where you would have a big chart, and you would have to go find the tangent of 50, 1.19, on this big chart. Now we can just put in our calculators, which is nice. So now cosine, trig, cosine, 50. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for sine of 50. And then those are the numbers we are looking for. Alright. And so that is just a little tutorial on how to put sine and cosine into the calculator. But that's all we're looking for on this sheet of paper right here. Is just tangent of 50, sine of 50, cosine of 50. Okay? And that's how you use your calculator. Now we are going to actually be doing what the entire point of trig is. The whole goal of this. So when we had Pythagorean theorem, we had 2 of the 3 sides, then we find the 3rd side. Trig, you only have one side. And then you use that one side and an angle to find another side. So that's what you're doing when you're using trigonometry. And you're always looking for x. So x will be labeled, or whatever variable it is, but that's what you're looking for. You have your angle, which I'm going to circle, because remember we circle our reference angles, and then you have your two sides. Notice triangles have three sides. One of them has nothing on it. So we are going to label the sides that actually have something written on it. This is our adjacent, and this one is opposite. The reason I'm not going to label this hypotenuse is because it will just confuse you, alright? So only label the sides that have something on it. The hypotenuse is blank, so we're not going to touch it. Alright, now we've got the opposite and the adjacent side. So we have our reference angle circled, we have the opposite side, we have the adjacent side of this triangle. Now we need to look back up into our special box, looking up here to our box, and we figure out which one of these three are we going to use, sine, cosine, or tangent. Well, sine has hypotenuse, cosine has hypotenuse, tangent is the only one that does not have a hypotenuse. So you are going to use tangent because it has opposite and adjacent, which is the two sides that we have labeled. Alright, so I'll go back down here. The tangent of our angle, remember you're always going to put an angle in that space. Tangent of our angle, I'm going to go ahead and put this in parentheses because that's what it'll look like in the calculator, is going to be equal to the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. So it matters which one you put where. The opposite is x, the adjacent is 24. Alright? And that's what it's going to look like. And then, I'm going to show you something. If you put a 1 under that, now what you have is a proportion. Alright, it looks kind of like a proportion where you can cross multiply and then solve. So x is now going to equal 24 times the tangent of 53. Here's something that will help you and make your life a lot easier while doing this. Always put the number first. Always. When you're putting this into the calculator, always put the number first. Alright. Our calculator's still a degree. That's important. So we're going to take 24, and we're going to multiply it by tangent of 53. Alright, we press enter, and it gives us the number 31.85. We'll go ahead and round it to the nearest hundredth. X equals 31.85. Okay, what did we just find? If we look back up here, x is the missing side of the triangle. So this side is 24. The side of this triangle is 31.5. We are done with this one. That is the whole thing. That's what you're doing. Okay, let's move on to number 4. Alright, go through the process. Circle your reference angle. Label your two sides. So we don't have the hypotenuse. We have the opposite and we have the adjacent side. Alright, so make sure all of this is written down. You have opposite and adjacent. Are we using sine, cosine, or tangent? Well, tangent is the only one that doesn't use the hypotenuse. So we are going to have tangent of our angle. We're going to set that equal to the opposite over the adjacent. Oh, this one looks a little bit different. Okay, the x is on the bottom here. So when we cross multiply, we will have x times the tangent of 31. And that is going to equal 7, because 7 times 1 is 7. But we want x all by itself. So the way we have to do this is divide by tangent of 31. And that's what we put in the calculator. So 7 divided by tangent of 31. It's 11.65, right? And that is what, oh, not 6.3, 11.65. Okay, who doesn't want a shortcut? I'm going to show you a shortcut right here, and it will make your life a lot easier, so you don't have to cross multiply anymore. And I'm going to write up here, I want you to write it on your paper too. When x is on top, so for example, example 1, you multiply. Alright? When x is on top, you multiply. When x is on bottom, you divide. Easy peasy. When x is on bottom, you divide. When x is on top, you multiply. Every single time, it's going to happen the same way. Just remember what I said. Always put the number in first. And that's what's going to keep you from, getting lost. Always put this number in first. So 24 times the tangent of 53. 7 divided by the tangent of 31. Always put that whole number in on the top, or put it in the calculator first. And then your tangent or sine or cosine will go in a second. Alright, let's move on. So we have, here's our reference angle. We have H. We have O. We don't have the adjacent side, so I'm not going to write anything there because I don't want it to confuse us. If we look up here, we need which one, sine, cosine, or tangent, has opposite and hypotenuse. Boom, right there, sine. So we've got sine of 51 is equal to x over 63. It is important which one goes where. The x is on top because it's opposite. 63 is on bottom because it's the hypotenuse. Alright, now we look back at what we wrote. When x is on top, you multiply. When x is on bottom, you divide. X is on top, so we're going to multiply these. 63 times sine 51. And that's what x is going to equal. This is how we put it in our calculator. 63 times sine of 51. Alright, we got 48.96. Alright, I'm gonna start going a little faster. If you need me to slow it down, you can pause the video. Alright, we're going to circle the reference angle, and then we've got hypotenuse and opposite. We are using sine again because we have O and H. So sine of our angle always, it's 63. Sine of our angle, which is 63, is going to be equal to 43 over x. Now x is on bottom. So 43 divided by sine of 63. Put it in our calculator. We get 48.26. Make sure you put the 43 in first. You're dividing 43 divided by sine of 63. Alright, moving on. We're going to come to the back of this page. Circle our reference angle, and then we have the adjacent side and the hypotenuse now. Okay? We do not have the opposite side. So is it sine, cosine, or tangent? If you look back, it's going to be cosine. So cosine of 28 equals x over 44, your adjacent side over your hypotenuse. And then when you multiply, because x is on top, you get 44 times cosine of 28, 38.85 is what the side of your triangle equals. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. Reference angle, label the sides. We don't have the opposite. We have the adjacent and the hypotenuse again. So cosine of 41 is equal to 48 divided by x. Now, the x is on bottom. So instead of multiplying, we are going to divide. Always put the number on top. 48 divided by cosine 41. Number on top. Trig function on bottom. And we get 63.60, so I'm just going to put 63.6. Alright, now I want you to pause this video and I want you to try 9 and 10 on your own. You have to solve 2 different types of problems for 9 and 10. Alright, do 2 different types of sides. So solve for 9 and 10, pause, and then I'll show you the answers. Alright, here are the answers for those 2 problems. So check your work, you can pause it, figure out what you did wrong, and then you guess it. Now you want to complete page 12 in the packet. So if you look at page 12, you've got 12 problems finding the side of the triangle. So it's exactly what we just did. Circle the reference angle, label the sides, solve. Okay? So you can pause the video, go finish that, and then we'll teach the last thing. Alright, hopefully you're done with page 12. So now we're going to move on to finding angles. Alright, so one thing I want to point out is that you will use the inverse functions to find angles. So it looks like this right here. So angles mean inverse. So if I show you on the screen, it is these bottom 3 to find the angles. Tangent inverse, sine inverse, cosine inverse, right here. Okay? So I'll show you exactly what is going on here. You still set it up just like you would normally. Sine of your angle, but we don't know our angle, so we put x, and then we know the 2 sides of the triangle, so we put them there, and then we change it to sine inverse, which I'll explain it in more detail in just a second. So you want to take your calculator, and you want to type in sine inverse. You want to type in 15 over 19. So now it looks just like what we have here, and that is going to be 52 degrees. Okay, all this is showing you how to put this into the calculator. So when you use cosine, 4 divided by 5, you're going to get 37 degrees. When we are solving for the degree, typically we solve to the nearest whole number. Alright. And then the last one's 65. Let's check your answer. Alright, here for number 11, for sine of 1/2. So the way you change it, when you have sine of an angle, you don't know that angle, you want to use the inverse in your calculator. So it looks like this, sine inverse of 1/2. Put that in your calculator and you get 30 degrees. Okay, so go ahead and do that for number 12. Okay, so that's what it should look like in your calculator, tangent inverse of 4 over 3. Then when you solve, you get 53 degrees. Okay, pause your video, you can do number 13, and then when you restart it, I'll write the answer in. Okay, that's the answer for that one. Alright, number 14. Finding angles is much easier than finding sides. This is the easy part of the notes. You are going to do the same steps as you did for finding sides. It's just easier. So circle your angle. Always do that first. Label your sides, only the 2 sides that you have something on. You don't want to label the hypotenuse. So there's opposite and there's adjacent. And then you got to figure out, what am I using? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Well, we don't have the hypotenuse, so we can't use sine or cosine. We have to use tangent. So tangent of our angle, which is x, is going to be equal to 51 over 23. So just like what we did in 11 through 13, now we change that to tangent inverse of 51 over 23 and put that in the calculator. That's it. So tangent inverse of 51 over 23. is going to be 66 degrees. And that's it. You don't manipulate the numbers anyway. You don't change them. That's what it is. Alright, for this one, circle the reference angle, label the side, opposite, and hypotenuse. Then you have to look back in your box and figure out, are we using sine, cosine, or tangent? Sine is the only one that uses opposite and hypotenuse. So 43 on top, 48 on bottom. We are looking for y. When you're looking for the angle, you use the inverse. Sine inverse, 43 over 48. When you put that in the calculator, you get 64 degrees. Okay, go ahead and try the last one. And then pause your video, and I'll show you the answer. Alright, the answer to the last one, number 16, is 31 degrees. It's the cosine inverse of 30 over 35. Alright, now you can complete page 13 in your packet.